All right, recording. Can you all see my screen?
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
cool. So the past few days, we've been using Django, but we've just been creating database schema and just getting you familiar with how to create models and just the Pythonic way to create tables in your database and connect those tables to Postgres, etc. Today, we're actually going to go in and build an application using Django, starting from, utilizing the model view controller architecture or framework. And we're going to walk through that process and create, a mini CRUD application. So with that, I'm in this intro to Django directory right here. What's the first thing I need to do to create a Django project?
Virtual environment.
Create a virtual environment. Great. Thank you, Dylan. So python-make venv, let's just call it venv. You're going to see a virtual environment pop up here. I'm going to go into my virtual environment, source venv bin activate to activate my virtual environment. So now I'm currently in my virtual environment. Whoop, clear. Now I want to, so I'm in my virtual environment. I just want to see pip list because I want to list all the packages that are in my virtual environment. And right now there's just this pip and setup tools. So Django does not exist in this virtual environment yet. So the first thing I need to do is actually install Django. Pip install Django. And you could install Django globally. That's totally fine. It shouldn't matter. So if you weren't in your virtual environment and you installed Django globally, that's totally fine. But I'm just going to install Django locate in my virtual environment. Whoop. I wonder if that's going to work. Cool. So it's installing Django. Cool. So I'm going to clear the terminal. I'm going to pip list again just to make sure Django's installed. So Django's installed, and it also installed some of these other packages. I don't know exactly what they do. So now I've got Django installed. Now I want to create a brand new Django project. What's the difference between a Django app and a Django project?
A project holds the Django apps.
So a project holds Django apps. So yes, and you said apps plural. So exactly, a single Django project can have many apps attached to it. So in order for me to create a Django project, so that's the first thing I need to do. I could do Django-admin, start project, and let's just call this project my site. So I'm creating a project, and you see my site show up here. So I'm inside my intro to Django directory, and I've got my site here. And if I open up that, it creates another directory. So it's like 2 levels deep, and now I'm inside my Django project, or like my site's project. And I don't necessarily like how this goes that many levels deep. I want my manage.py file in my sites directory on the same level as, so I don't want to have to go down this many directories to get into my Django, the core to my Django project. I kind of want everything to reside like right here inside my intro to Django directory. So there's a way you can do that. So I'm just going to delete my Django project just by deleting all the directories. And I'm going to create my Django projects, my site again, but instead of just doing Django admin, start project, my site, I'm going to do Django admin, start project, my site, space, period. And what that does is literally just creates the my site. It essentially just gets rid of the parent directory of the my site. So everything is still the same, except I don't have to go down another layer into my site. Everyone see that? So
Where that period is that a path? Could you traverse directories with that?
I actually don't know if you can do that.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe, but I've never tried to do that. You don't have to add that period. It just makes it a little cleaner because I don't have to go so many directories down. All right. So I've created my Django project again called my site. And let's look at some of these files. So here's the manage.py file. This is just the main command. So I need to execute Python. I need to run this manage.py file to execute commands for my Django project to execute different instructions to either like start a project, make migrations. I need to run the manage.py file. That's all you really need to know about that. You never need to edit this manage.py file. Then you have this init Python done under init method or file. Don't need to know anything about that. Just know that needs to exist there. We have this ASGI and WSGI file. This just allows Python or Django to run on different kind of servers. It's the entry point into our application. When we actually start a server, it jumps into here. You don't have to worry about the ASGI file or the WSGI file. Then we have our URLs. Think of URLs as like the actual index of what pages exist in our project. So if I want to visit a specific URL, I need to add that URL into this URL patterns like directory. We'll get to that. And then our settings is just a bunch of configuration for our Django application. This is where we add our apps. This is where we add our Postgres database. This is where we can add other configurations to configure our Django project to make it a little more customizable. What questions do you have so far? Nothing? So now that I've started my Django project, I just want to execute. I just want to run this project, like actually run it and spin it up and go to like a web page. So in order to do that, I can literally run Python manage.py run server. So the run server command just literally spins up a new Django or a new server for my Django project. And I can explicitly say like what localhost I want, but if I just do run server and don't include anything after it, it runs on port 8000. So if I literally just run Python manage.py space run server and execute that. All right, let's see what it says. All right. So it says watching for the file changes with stat reloader, performing system checks. System check identified, no issues. You have 18 unapplied migrations. Your project may not work properly until these apply migrations for these different apps, admin, auth, content type sessions, blah, blah, blah. It says, here's my Django version, and it's currently running on port 8000. So if I literally go to port localhost 8000, click that. This is my Django project. So Django already comes with this my web page. It has links to documentation, tutorial, which we're going to kind of walk through, community. So I'm literally just going to localhost 8000 and I just spun up my Django app. What questions do you have about spinning up a Django app? And
is there a way to do this outside of the command line? I know that's what we're supposed to be doing, but like, has someone created a way to, like a desktop version, a desktop app for Django where you can sort of use a GUI to do some of this stuff?
Not that I know of. I've never heard of such a thing.
Okay.
And if you notice, when I went to localhost 8000, it ran a GET request and ran all this, like these are like the actual requests that go through when I actually visit different web pages. And these 18 unapplied migrations, if I open up my settings and look at all these apps, these built-in apps that are already come as default for my Django, these are all the migrations that I can run, and it'll create all those tables. I know some of you have run like Python manage.py migrate, and a bunch of tables were created, and you're like, oh, what the hell are all these tables? These are the tables. The tables that were created are associated with these built-in apps for Django. So it comes with a default admin, sessions, messages, and auth. And we'll get to that in a little bit. So I've got my Django project up and running on my server. And now I'm just going to kill it. I'm going to clear the screen. Now I want to actually create an app. So the app I want to create is a polls app that literally just, asks a question and people can vote on stuff. So if you think of like, if you go to Twitter and people write polls, if you go into Slack, you can create a questionnaire and people can select the answers as far as like, and it'll poll how many votes go to what specific answer. So I'm going to create a polls app. What's the command to create a new app inside of my Django project?
Django tag admin start app.
Admin start app, like that.
Yeah, and then app name, I guess polls, yeah.
Django admin start app. So that's one way we can do it. So like that. I'm going to delete that. You can also just run Python manage.py start app polls. It does exactly the same thing. So Python manage.py start app polls, or Django admin start app polls. And notice here's my site. That's the name of my Django project. And here's my polls app right here. And inside my polls app, you have all these different files. You have this init, admin, apps, models that you should be familiar with. It doesn't have any models right here. We have tests, which we have already pre-built tests in the other challenges. And then we have another file called views. What questions do you have so far about creating a new app inside my Django project?
So start app polls. So that's we're creating the new app because it's not listed in settings.
Correct. So if I go to my site or the settings, notice how my installed apps polls isn't created. So I'm creating a new app called polls.
I think when you ran that Django admin, it created that DB SQLite 3 file. What is that?
So when I spooled up my Django app, so when I started the server, it went into settings, looked at all the apps that were needed, and then it looked at my database. And my default database is a SQLite database. So I'm not actually connected to a Postgres database yet. So that's the SQLite database is literally just a file called DB SQLite 3. And it's a light database. It's literally just a file that I'm able to execute SQL commands on and store data to. So right now I don't have a Postgres database.
So will we have to add the polls app to settings later?
Yes.
And is that at the end of us writing the app?
No, that's actually probably the first thing you should do. If you ever get errors when you're creating an app and like says like, hey, like if it just kind of breaks, more often than not, it's because you forgot to add the polls app to the installed app. I'm glad you brought that up. So let's look at let's run our server again. So again, I open up my server. Everything's running. Cool. Now the Django framework runs on the model view controller architecture or framework. And the purpose of the model view controller is to separate concerns, just kind of like how you want to break down complex algorithms or complex problems into a lot smaller ones. You want to separate out the different functionality. That's kind of the same ethos to the model view controller, because you want to extrapolate all the different data and into like what they specifically want to do or what they need to do. And it's a little confusing with Django. It's more intuitive with Ruby just because of the naming conventions of it. But let's look at the model view controller, or what they call the request response cycle. So when you first visit a web page or start a server, it goes into this Wsgi file. It just literally turns HTTP requests into Python objects. Again, you don't need to know about that Wsgi file. And then when you visit a route, it goes through the URLs or the router. And then the URLs will tell you, hey, when I visit a URL, what do I need to do? What kind of logic do I need to perform on that when I hit that URL? So then it points us to the direction of the views, that views PI file. So if I go into here, if I go into polls, notice how in my site we have our URLs. So it goes to URLs, and then we don't have a URLs file in our apps yet, but we will create one. And then once it goes to the URLs, it's going to go to a views file. And then here we're going to do some sort of business logic. So it handles all the business logic. And then if I need to extrapolate stuff from the database or go into the database, then it passes from the views. I can go into the models and grab the data, or utilize the models to grab data from the database, and it points it back to the view. So I pass data from the database into the views here, and then it passes it off to what we call templates, which are literally just HTML templates that we were kind of creating before. What challenge were we creating front end with Psychop G2? I forgot what challenge that was, but we haven't created all that yet. And this just handles all the presentation logic, essentially what you see on the screen. Then it just pushes it back to the user. So the model is literally the models. The views, it might be like in the model view controller, it might, let's actually bring it up. Here's in the curriculum. So again, HTTP requests, models, views, and templates. Right here, the model view controller, that models associates to the model PY file. The view actually associates to the actual presentation layer, so that what the user is viewing, and the controller handles all the business logic, and that's associated with the views.py file in Django. What questions do you have about the model view controller architecture? And the reason why we just want to separate all the responsibilities to the app into separate separate directories or files. So not everything is all in one file, essentially. And we'll see that once we start to build this out. All right. So I created my app first. Now let's actually create when a user goes to my polls app, I want to do something. So the first thing I want to do is in my site, I'm going to delete all this stuff. instead of going directly to where is it? Just localhost 8000. I want to go to local 8000 / polls. And I want it to go into my polls app. So what I want to do is in my site project in the URLs, I want to import this thing called include, this method called include, and I want to include another path to go to. I want to go to polls, and what I want to include the polls app, and inside the polls app, I want to execute the URLs file. So if I click that, so my server is still running and it says no module not found error, no module named polls.urls. So inside of my polls app, I need to create a urls.py file. So I've got my project URLs file, and notice how it already has one called admin. So if I literally just go to admin, and we'll get into this later on. Oh, it's not working now because there's an error, but you'll see it once I create that. So in my polls URL file that I just created, I'm going to copy this over. I'm going to get rid of this admin because I don't need this admin. When I enter my polls app, just from the my site, if I just go to mysite.polls, it comes into my applications URLs. And if I just don't want, if I don't want to go to like polls dot something or polls / something, if I just want to go to polls, I don't need to include anything here. And in here, I don't necessarily need to include here. So the path method takes in potentially multiple arguments. So inside, when I go to polls / nothing, I want to go into my views dot index file. So views dot index, which I haven't created yet. And name, I'm just going to pass in another variable or argument called name equals index. Now, if I go into my views right here, I need to, I guess, import my views, import from * import all my views. So now I can do def index, which takes in a request from the user, just kind of like the request response. And I'm just going to pass that right now. Polls.url. Now if I just go to polls, let's see if this works. Nothing shows up. No module name polls.urls. Let's see. Polls.urls. I'm gonna clear that. From * import views.
Should it be from views import all?
No, I'm going to do from period import views. Sorry. So it's literally just saying like, hey, from the same whatever directory I'm in, import everything from the views file. So import everything. Now, if I come in here, see, I'm getting an error. It says the view polls.view index method didn't return an HTTP response object. It returned none instead. So let's just walk through what happens when I go to /polls. So when I go to /polls, it goes to the urls.py file in my project. So in my site project, it goes to the URLs file, and it looks for a URL pattern /polls / which right here it does. So it comes into here, finds that. It said also include, go to the polls.urls file and look at that now. So it goes into polls/ or polls.urls file, and it says, hey, anything that comes after the polls / look into here now. And if nothing comes out after the polls / which nothing does, so like it's literally just polls, look into the views file and find the index method and execute that index method. So now I'm going into the views.index method, and it's now I'm getting an error. It says, hey, the views.polls.index method didn't return an HTTP response object. So I actually need to return an HTTP response object. So I'm gonna, from Django.http, import HTTP response. This is a Django method. So I can return an HTTP response that just says, hello world. I'll just say, hello, Mike Platoon. And now nothing's breaking yet. So if I come back here, click that, I get hello, Mike Platoon. What questions do you have so far? No questions?
So in your urls.py file,
Which one?
polls.
Okay, polls.
Yeah, the name equals index, is that, so that's the function in your views file as well?
So no, like I don't necessarily need that.
Okay.
So this is going to come in later as when we get into named routes. So this is
Okay.
just here temporarily, but we'll get into that later. So again, it first goes into my project URLs. I'm adding a route to polls. And then once it comes into this URLs in this project URLs file, it goes on to the polls.urls file. So inside my app, and it looks for anything after the polls / and it tries to match anything that comes up with that. And if it finds a match, which it does right here, because nothing comes after the polls / it comes into our views and looks for an index method and executes that. So it comes into the views, finds that index method, takes in the request, and just returns an HTTP response of hello, Mike Platoon.
So if you put something inside the empty string, like / inside the polls, yeah, if you put something in there, then it would, you could, yeah, how would that apply?
So we'll get into that shortly.
Okay.
All right,
Can I see the urls.py for my site again?
right here.
Okay. I know you just explained this, but it was a little fast. So URLs what's the relationship between URLs py my site and URLs py polls?
So because Django Project can have many apps, I can include a different app in here. So a Django project always enters into the first URLs it hits is the project urls.py file. So it comes into here, and then it's like, okay, where do you want to send me? And I can send you to pretty much anywhere I want. It doesn't necessarily have to belong into the polls app. I can create another app called like answers or checkout, and I can add like another app called like a checkout and include the checkout app and go to the checkout app's URLs. But this current Django project only has one app, so it's going to point me into the polls app's URLs. So once I visit the polls / or /, it's going to point me to the polls app's URLs. And then it's going to look at anything after that once I get to the polls app URLs.
So we don't have to put .py at the end of on my site at the end of line 6. We don't have to put .py in there.
Right here?
Yeah, isn't that the file path?
No, I actually don't know what this explicitly is pointing me to. I think it's just saying like, hey, include other URLs. I don't know explicitly what the include app takes in.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it actually probably is looking at the polls app and then going into the URLs file. So yeah, but I don't know for sure.
So is the reason you'd want to have different URLs, like if you were a big company, like say Amazon, and you have like Prime Video, and then you have your shopping, and then you have your Kindle, all of those could be stored in one Django app?
It would be all stored in one Django project.
Oh, right. Yeah. Sorry. That's what I mean. And then if
No,
you go to a certain project or a certain app, then you'll have just that app's functionality. So if you go to like the video, Prime Video, you only have like the video streaming stuff. And then if you go to like the shopping, you only have the shopping stuff.
Yep, exactly.
So when you say stored within one project in that example, so just Amazon.com would be like the project. And then once you add in your forward slashes, that's when you're going to all your different apps.
Yep, like videos.
Okay.
And then you'd have a videos app. And then the videos app would have its own unique URLs.
So in this case, you go to the videos app, and it's got a bunch of its own URLs because it has movies, TV shows, my list, whatever, right? And so those are those things on the movies.py URL, the URLs, the movies URLs.
Yes.
Videos,
So,
and then can those things have like another layer of URLs? So you'd have under videos, you would have, or movies, you'd have genres and ratings and other things too. Like, and do you have to create new files for each of those things?
No, you don't have to create new files once you're inside of an app. So in here, I can add more functionality or more URLs to this URL pattern, and which we'll get to right now. So let's see, did that work? Videos, I just want to make sure everything's still working. Does not work. No module named videos. Okay, there we go. Just gonna refresh. Okay. So now I'm in the views. And if we look over here, the views will interact with the models, but I don't have any models yet. If I look over here, my models are empty. So I'm going to create my models. So I'm just going to copy some code from the data from the lecture. So I've got question and a choice. So each question will have multiple choices. So if I ask like, hey, what's going on? Or like, what's your favorite color? And I give you choices of like red, green, blue. That's what the choice text will be. And people can vote on how many people like blue, red, or green. And then that's what that's about. So I've got a question. So I've got the question text. I have the publish date. That has a default. I'm passing in a verbose name, which is just, will make it pretty when I want to print it to the screen. Has a question. So a question belongs to, a choice belongs to a question. That's why we have this foreign key. Question with related name choices. We have the choice text. So this will be like the actual selection of what users want, red, green, blue, and the number of votes associated with that choice. So I'm just going to clear that. So now, so I created my models. Or what questions do you have about the models? It's really simple. It's not that complex right now. So do you want to take a 5-minute break and get back to this? Yay, nay? Yep. All right. Let's take a 5-minute break
Yep.
and come back to this.